Alright, wait, no.
Like, are we all ready? Wait,
Supposed...
what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to do something?
What are you doing?
I don't know. What are you doing?
Alright, let's do this!
Welcome to Omedia. Thank you for tuning in. Follow us on all the things and enter our photo contests. Send us any pictures of things make you happy and share it with our community. I'm your host, A, Austin.
And I'm your host, B, Cory.
Today we're covering our NewzSpace segment, as well as a special segment, The Sistahood by the Dowdu sisters, which will be reoccurring and cover some Black Canadian inventors for this segment. And we're also going to have another one on economics. We were calling the Econ-assists. The Econ-assists?
The Econ-assist. And we have Sam joining us for that conversation again, so it's good to have Sam back.
Yeah, and anybody else who wants to be on our show, do your own segments or anything, feel free to contact us and connect and we can discuss.
Yeah, we want to make sure to be highlighting all sorts of community issues or any sorts of projects anybody has going on, so reach out.
Things you're passionate about, if you want to tell a story, whatever it is. But for now, let's turn to NewzSpace and check out some of the current trends and currents going on in the world.
NewzSpace. It's just in breaking. Welcome to NewzSpace.
Yeah, this is coming to you from NewzSpace headquarters. This is Cory and Austin here, and these are some of our top stories.
We have breaking news coming in out of the South Park universe. It looks like the show will be returning on March 10th with another special, the vaccination special, so get excited and mark it on your calendars.
We've been getting reports out of Texas about freezing temperatures, things about their water pipes bursting and electricity bills skyrocketing. Ted Cruz is in some pretty hot water. It keeps getting hotter. He's been blaming his kids for going to Mexico, and it turns out his college roommate was actually on the plane with them. A little suspicious.
Yeah, Ted Cruz, born in Calgary, gotta love him. Speaking of other Calgary news, we did have a little bit of an interstellar moment when a meteor flew over Calgary on February 22nd. If you have any sort of outward-facing cameras that point out, go check them for that night, and you may have caught a little bit of the meteor.
Yeah, it caught many people's attention early in the morning. And speaking of celestial objects crashing into Earth, let's turn to one of our main stories on things that we're sending from Earth to Mars. We've had 3 recent missions to Mars in February. The UAE AML Orbiter, the Chinese Tianwen-1, and the US NASA Perseverance. These missions to Mars are all re-energizing a discussion around space exploration and maybe possibly misused resources when we have other issues in the world we should be dealing with. But altogether, these missions are happening near the same time because Earth and Mars are so close, and they all share a mission in trying to further understanding on the only other potentially habitable planet in our solar system, from what we can tell, and determine if there's ever been life on Mars. The UAE AML Orbiter is going to be spending the next couple years studying the Martian atmosphere from orbit and answering questions on how Mars changed from having an Earth-like environment that was warm and wet to what is now a cold, dry planet with a thin atmosphere. Meanwhile, the Tianwen-1 mission is going to be sending a rover to the surface of Mars looking for evidence of ice underground. The rover is scheduled to be landing on Mars in the same position where NASA first touched down in 1976 on a wide-open plane known as the Utopia Planitia. The NASA Perseverance mission has landed on a new spot on Mars known as the Jezero crater, which used to be filled by a lake and possibly bears rocks or signs of microbes and a metabolical process from life millions of years ago, if it ever existed there. And the rover that NASA sent in the Perseverance mission is going to be collecting rock samples and bagging them up to later be retrieved in another mission in 2026. And the plan is for NASA to team up with the European Space Agency to launch a dune buggy in 2026 to fetch these rock samples, along with a rocket ship which will then put these specimens into orbit around Mars and then eventually make its way back to Earth being the first rock samples from another planet to ever be retrieved and brought back to Earth.
In addition, the Perseverance rover has a helicopter hitchhiking. It's known as Ingenuity, and they'll perform with this helicopter the first flight launched from a foreign planetary body. So it'll be a little bit of a Wright brothers moment there for Mars. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, and altogether, these 3 different missions all symbolize like greater stepping stones for our human interstellar colonization of Mars, the 4th rock from the sun. They're looking for frozen ice to harvest for water, and the Perseverance mission also has an experiment called MOXIE, in which they're going to be pumping CO2 from the atmosphere and try to strip out the oxygen because we need the oxygen to breathe. So these are really stepping stones for us to eventually have people on Mars if everything goes well.
Yeah, right. If the Chinese are able to find the presence of large underground ice reservoirs, and we're able to prove the utility of separating oxygen from the atmosphere, then we've really solved 2 of the key fundamental blocks that we'll need to solve if we're ever going to have any sort of habitability on Mars.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really a big inflection point for space travel now with all these missions going to Mars. Like, growing up, you might have heard about the odd mission, but it was never really quite as great as like the moon landing back in the 60s. But now it seems like there's a lot of attention around it. It's mainstream again. People actually care about space travel. Elon Musk is doing his big things. But sometimes we really got to ask ourselves, like, are the rich global elites just running away from the world's problems and pretending like we don't need to solve things like global hunger or climate change? Or, because I'm pretty sure I've heard Elon Musk basically say, like, climate change at the rate we're going, we're not going to be able to do anything about it, so we might as well at least not have all our eggs in one basket. But part of me also thinks, like, if, you know, him and the other global elites were actually doing something to fight climate change, maybe we wouldn't have to run to Mars.
It's right? I mean, it's a bit of a pessimistic analysis, but maybe realistic by Elon to say, hey, we can't have all of our bags in one basket. It's time to start hedging the bet of humanity a little bit here. And I mean, at the end of the day, I do think that the challenges that we face here and the challenges that we face trying to get to Mars are 2 tasks that could be done concurrently.
Yeah.
But given some of the like inefficiencies of the systems that we do have and the lack of mobility around certain problems we have here, it does make you wonder if we need those resources to really solve that first problem and, you know, take care of home base and then start taking care of getting the second house, right? Like, let's pay off the first mortgage.
I mean, with like these existential threats of like climate change or the corona pandemic and other things, like, you know, should we not come together as a planet and try to fix all these problems we've been running into? And yeah, I
mean, we should, and I don't. It's the question of is the scientific expedition that we're on and the money that it takes and the resources that are required to go answer these questions and try to push this project forward. You know, is it fair to the human project, you know, as a whole? Is it proportionate? I mean, there's a lot of people that would say that it's nihilistic to not try in some sense, given the reality of having all of our eggs in that one basket. But at the same time, man, it definitely feels a little bit like escapism sometimes, right?
Overall, I'm usually a fan of like diversifying, trying everything we can. But like, you got to wonder if we're really trying to solve world hunger or if we're really trying to solve a lot of these other problems on Earth. And so let's just hope for the best, I suppose. Like, I feel like, you know, there's always a balance, and hopefully things happen for a reason, and we're going to make it through all this.
Yeah, and hopefully space travel and this space moment that we find ourselves in inspires the better parts of our humanity to, like, think of the Earth as a collective, to look out for other aspects of our humanity, and, you know, hopefully that's the direction that it moves in, and it doesn't ultimately become a distraction from real-world problems that are present and growing.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess speaking of such real world problems, we can turn to our next main story within our NewzSpace segment, which is that there was recently a motion passed in the Canadian House of Commons recognizing Chinese persecution of the Uyghur people as a genocide. This wasn't a formal motion, it was passed by or like drafted by the opposition party of the Conservatives, but it was passed by like a majority in the House of Commons. So
yeah, it was passed just yesterday, Monday, the 22nd. Yeah, and yeah, it was. What's interesting about it is that it is a opposition motion. It was supported by the majority of the Liberals present, as well as the Conservatives, New Democrats. There was actually 0 votes against the motion in the House. There were 2 abstentions. One of them was by the only present member of the cabinet that was there for the vote. Every cabinet member, except for one, was absent for the vote. We can only assume for important political strategic reasons and trying to save certain face given the relationship between Canada and China. But the one cabinet member that was present did vote for abstention on behalf of the government of Canada, while the other members largely voted in favor of the motion. We had, I believe it was 266 MPs vote in favor of the motion.
Which means that 70 or 80 of them just didn't show up.
Yeah, well, all cabinet and a few others, yeah.
The
Trudeau wasn't there to vote.
And with the whole saving face thing, it's them trying to say, like, listen, we didn't do that. It was just, like, our elected officials, or other elected officials. And
yeah. I mean, it's a tough political issue, too, because there are people that would charge the Conservatives of using this issue as some sort of, like, political stratagem where, you know, they haven't been the party to support
human rights.
Human rights abroad, Islam in general, you know, like the attitude of the Conservative Party towards some of these issues hasn't been historically great. So is this a moment where we're seeing a new Conservative Party with a new set of interests in mind and some sort of a change in their platform or understanding? I mean,
to be honest, I like the change that I'm seeing for the most part. Like, Aaron O'Toole, the new leader of the Conservative Party, has also been proposing that Canada should boycott the 2022 Beijing Olympics because of these human rights allegations, and especially now that we've officially recognized it as a genocide, really makes you think, like, if we are calling them out on having a genocide, like, should we be participating in them hosting the Olympics? So overall, I'd almost generally support the idea, but you have to think about the backlash that's involved with that. China's already kind of like striking back at Canada for like recognizing this as a genocide, and if we boycott the Olympics, like, China's already threatened countries with like sanctions for any countries that would go forth with such measures. And so as much as I like seeing this with the like new Conservative Party, I still gotta wonder, like, what are they thinking having a leader with the last name O'Toole? I don't think that's an electable name.
They just made it too easy for all the progressive left-leaners to make quippy jokes about him.
I mean, what are the rest of, like, the international community going to think if our
Prime Minister O'Toole.
Yeah. South Park is going to be just running with that.
Yeah. I hear you, man.
Yeah. But overall, like, it's really a question of it. If we even do boycott the Olympics, I really don't think that's too realistic. Like, what is it really going to do? The Olympic Committee is not going to change their mind. It's not going to affect China that much at the end of the day. It's just going to end up causing Canada some pain and struggles. It does have political gains for, like, say, Aaron O'Toole. It makes him look good. As long as we don't actually go through with it, then everybody's going to blame him for like the repercussions.
Well, I mean, I guess given that, how do you feel? How would you compare the call to boycott China, given their involvement in this now classified as a genocide against the Uyghurs in Canada, at least by our house, to the boycott of the USSR in the 1980s for its invasion of Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, I'd have to draw some parallels between, like, in the 1980s we boycotted the, like, Moscow Olympics, but that was because the US was calling on all the other countries of the world to do it. And Aaron O'Toole, being conservative, probably has more ties to American interests. Maybe, you know, the Americans kind of would almost want to boycott it too, but they don't want to call China out so directly, but that leaves room for Canada to kind of do it. We already have various issues with China that have been highlighted in recent times.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good point to bring up, just the continuing deteriorating relationship that's kind of happened as, we've arrested Huawei executives and we've still got that trial still playing out.
Yeah, and they have indefinite prisoners of our diplomats, or just a couple Canadians who are in prison there.
Yeah. It's tough, but you could see how, the U.S. stays out of it. They use us as their talking piece. We get to be, we speak from some sort of moral high ground, incur the economic consequences, and then America gets to be like, yeah.
You gotta wonder if Canada is just a pawn for American interests sometimes.
Almost always.
Yeah.
Almost always, yeah.
Well, I think that kind of wraps up NewzSpace for today. Now that we've wrapped things up, let's go back to the Zesty Electric studio and hand it over to the Dowdo sisters and their new segment, The Sistahood.
Hey everyone, and welcome to The Sistahood with Titilola
and Matola.
The Sistahood.
The Sistahood.
The Sistahood.
Thanks for joining us today. We're here to celebrate Black Canadian history. Me and Matola were sisters. We're third-generation Canadians of Nigerian descent, and we just love and appreciate Black history, Black Canadian history, and all the impact it has. A little bit about me. I'm the youngest in the family, so I'm forever the baby, and I just live with it, and that's okay. I'm a nanny by birth, mainly because I'm just a big kid at heart. And currently I'm going to MRU to get a bachelor in education, and since I'm a globetrotter, I'm hoping to just learn and teach around the world and see what I find out there. Matola, let's hear about you.
My name is Matola. I say that I'm an aspiring filmmaker, but I've made 3 films. 2 I have helped produce. One that I wrote, directed myself. I'm actually getting ready to make another one in the summer of 2021. I am a spoken word artist. I've also done community management, community events. I've done that for many years. So I've worked in nonprofit for, I don't know how long. My background is in marketing. I also, what else do I do?
What don't you do? Africa Day.
Yeah, I'm also the assistant artistic director for Africa Day, which has been around for nearly 30 years. So I love that. I've gotten to meet great artists from around the world. And I am currently getting ready to launch a web series with Glenbow Museum. We're going to be starting talking with historians about Black settlers in Alberta, namely Amber Valley and North Battleford, so I'm really excited about that. We're also going to be telling stories, Indigenous stories, First Nation stories, and so I'm really, really excited to help with the decolonization of the information that is put out there. So really just kind of hoping that this Storykeeper web series will enlighten and educate people at the same time.
That sounds pretty exciting. Every time I hear your bio, your CV, I'm always pretty jealous. I'm working on building mine up. And
I'm still working on it.
I'm going to be in your league soon, Matola. So today we're talking about inventors, Black Canadian inventors. We got 2 people we're going to be focusing on, Elijah Mccoy and William Payton Hubbard.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of the real McCoy?
Yes, I have.
You know the saying?
I know the saying very well, although I'm going to be honest, I didn't know for the longest time where it came from and what it meant.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about where it did come from and what it means, and learn a little bit about the Hubbard portable oven. So,
well, first, I think I was saying to you that I don't know, what do you remember about learning about inventions in school? Because I think for me, I learned, like I was saying before, I learned about inventors, but mainly American inventors, and that never included Black inventors. So I definitely didn't learn about Canadian inventors, and certainly not Black Canadian inventors. We learned about Thomas Edison and all of those great inventors, but there was nothing said about, what Canada brought. And black people, of course, were never included. So I think that the fact that these two very prominent inventors who have changed, landscapes, that we've never even heard about them.
Yeah.
They're not taught in schools.
I definitely didn't learn. I don't think I can say that I learned about any black inventors in school, especially not Canadian black inventors. The only real information, that we got was from mom and dad, and it really was completely separate from anything in the education system. But so let's talk about these inventors and bring some life into them. First, we're going to talk about Elijah Mccoy. That real Mccoy. He was the son of runaway slaves who came to Canada through the Underground Railway. So Mccoy was born in Colchester, Ontario in 1844, and right from birth he was very just a gifted child. He was mechanically inclined, and his parents saw this, so they wanted to send him to a school that would, foster his gifts, but being a black child from runaway slaves, it wasn't a really easy task to find a school that would accept him. So eventually they did find a school in Edinburgh, Scotland, and they sent him there. He was about 16 years old, and after a few years he finished his apprenticeship and came back as a certified engineer. So he came back as a certified engineer, and even although he was certified and had gone through his apprenticeship already, he found it difficult to get a job. No one wanted they didn't want black employees. I mean, of course, in the time it was not easy for him to find any work. So he had to settle for a pretty menial job on the Michigan Central Railroad, working as a fireman and oiler for the railroad, lubricating the moving parts so that each locomotive would not, catch fire. But
that's a pretty cool invention, because when you think about it, I mean, back then the industrialized revolution was kind of not at its peak, but it was coming. And if you have to transport things across the country and you have to stop frequently to oil things up, that would take months. And also if you're carrying hazardous material.
Yeah, so
you run the risk of catching fire and all those things. I think that whatever gave him that idea, I mean, I know what we said gave him the idea because he was, doing it along the way.
It was taking so long. He's realizing it was just wasting so much time stopping, lubricating. So that's what popped this thought into his head that, what if I invented something that, it just lubricates it on its own. And that's, he came up with the automatic lubricating device for steam locomotives in 1872. And it was a whirlwind invention. It was effective. It
was trailblazing.
Yeah, it was trailblazing.
And a lot of people tried to copy. I mean, I think that's when you have something so good, but other people are trying to imitate it. That is just something in itself. And one of the things that I was saying too is the fact that the other thing that is just so amazing is the fact that his parents were slaves and were able to run away, come to Canada through the Underground Railroad. But the fact that they had a family, because back then you couldn't get married, you couldn't, oftentimes the children were sold and you never know where they were.
Yeah.
So the fact that they were able to stay a family, run away, or he wasn't born yet, but come to Canada as husband and wife, and then have a child. And who would have thought that not only would they have a child, that he would be a genius and change the world, change how things happen in the world.
Right from here in Canada.
I think that is something that is absolutely, I don't know, it's spectacular.
It's amazing and admirable. It's something that, we should all really know about. Especially here in Canada, like the railway was what gave us Canada as expansion and
Gave us some sort of
gave
freedom.
us,
Gave our people some sort of freedoms coming up through the Underground Railroad. And we wouldn't have a lot of the things that we have now had he not come up with that invention.
yeah.
And he had how many inventions? Like
He
57?
had 57 inventions. 50 of them were patented.
That's crazy.
But yeah, he was very influential. About the real McCoy, so many people were trying to replicate this lubrication that he came up with, but always coming up short, and people would notice that, non-authentic McCoy style-esque lubricant, and they would say, no, give me that real McCoy. I'm not going to hit it up with that knockoff Malloy.
Yeah.
Give me the real McCoy.
I think that also says something to the fact that they knew that this black man invented something and it was so good they couldn't turn it down.
It was undeniable.
Yeah. Right? It didn't give him that option.
Yeah.
I mean, he couldn't get into school here, so he had to go to Scotland. But he invents something that's just, so amazing and is a game changer that they have no choice. They have to purchase and use this, this amazing thing that a black man invented.
There you go.
So
you're welcome.
you're not giving him option. Yeah, exactly. You're welcome.
Yeah. So that's the real McCoy. That was, he's an amazing inventor and influential Black Canadian. So that's a little bit about Elijah McCoy. He's awesome. Yeah, give him some snaps. The next inventor we're going to be talking about is William Payton Hubbard. So William Payton was born in Toronto in 1842. Again, his parents were runaway slaves from Virginia who also escaped through the Underground Railroad. He was a trained baker specializing in cakes, which is pretty good and yummy.
Which is delicious.
So his invention was the Hubbard portable oven, which was invented in the early 1900s. His company was successful, but it was actually his brothers who took it on and made the company more successful.
On his behalf.
Yeah. But he actually went on to become a politician, the first black politician in Toronto, which is actually a funny story how that came about, because he had been working for his uncle's horse-drawn taxi service, and one night in winter, some other taxi service had a customer and was in a car accident or a horse-drawn buggy accident. However that happened, and he saved the driver and the passenger. The passenger happened to be a publisher for a magazine, I believe, a newspaper publisher, George Brown. Yes, and so he was so grateful to him that he got his information. They talked a bit, and he encouraged him to run for public office. And although, there was obviously some trouble for him getting into politics as a black man, he ended up being elected to city council a total of 15 times. Wow. So that was...
Well, first off, it's really interesting that at that time, a white man would suggest to a black man, why don't you run for city council? That speaks volumes.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, there was a level of respect there. And there must have been something that he saw that, this person, this man, this gentleman would be great for our city. Like, what was it at that time?
He was actually even known as the common people's champion. Like, he was a man of the people. Everyone really, he inspired many people and just related to everyone, and that really showed in the polls, I guess.
Yeah, if you were fighting for things of better streets, better infrastructure, you're really trying to make your city better. It just shows that you're really putting your people first and you're putting the needs of the city first.
Yes.
So,
And one thing actually that he was known for fighting for was to stop the spread of privatization, especially for the water supply of the city. So in 1907, he called for public power and co-founded the first publicly owned hydroelectric company with Adam Beck. And that company is now known as Hydro One, so it's still, it's significant today. Think of if water was privatized. Oh my goodness. I'd be thirsty.
Yeah. And in some places in the world, it is.
Yeah.
Due to big
We're very
conglomerates
lucky here.
that I won't mention. So we are very lucky. And it's interesting that we're still fighting that fight.
Yeah.
It's something that, my personal opinion is that privatization is not, it doesn't benefit the common citizen.
It does not.
And it only benefits the person who is, capitalizing on the need
Exactly.
of mankind.
Yeah, to think that there would ever be a reason to privatize a basic necessity for all humans is, I don't know, it's a pretty morally unstable value to hold yourself to.
Yeah, it is. And it would be very hard because, even though he was city council, at that time it was still hard for Black people in Canada. And I think, and I know that in other places it was harder in other places than others, right? Like in Nova Scotia, it was very tough for people in Nova Scotia. People in Alberta were given land that wasn't workable. So the fact that he could kind of maneuver and work all around that spoke volumes, I think.
Really amazing. And even now today he's helping people still. There's a scholarship for Black students that want to work in power-related industries.
Yeah.
They could apply for I believe it's called the Hubbard scholarship. But that's something that helps even Black students today. His legacy goes on.
Yeah. I think there's definitely more Black inventors out there that have contributed so much to the world that we still don't know about because they've suppressed it.
Exactly.
And
do you know it was a Black person who came up with my favorite snack, the potato chip?
Well, that's a new one. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really?
That's a real one. Yeah. I mean, maybe we could talk about it on another one, but I will say maybe it was done sort of out of spite, but it turned out great, and I benefit from it every day, girl.
Yeah. Who says it's not a meal that you can enjoy morning, noon, and night?
Exactly. If I wake up and I have some chips in my bed, that's fine. If I take them chips to the kitchen, that's okay. If I bring them to the living room later on.
Yeah. As long as you're not eating the crumbs from the couch, I think it's...
and even if you do, which you definitely shouldn't, but, from time to time, maybe you just notice one on the seat.
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe you don't do that. I obviously wouldn't do that. It's crazy, girl.
Okay. We trust you.
Get chip-faced. I do like getting chip-faced. I like getting chip-faced. Yeah. So that's all we have for inventors for today. Hubbard snaps. Yeah.
Yes.
So thanks for joining us today. I hope you had fun and learned something.
Our special guest returning today, Sam Frederick.
Howdy.
Yeah, Sam has an economics degree, and he's our special economics correspondent and one of our executive producers on the show.
Yeah, we're gonna pick his brain today. Hopefully, get him to illuminate a little bit more on some of the economics that we don't get.
Yeah.
Hope I can help. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Last time we had Sam on the show, we were discussing GME stocks and Wall Street bets. Just wanted to say I'd definitely willingly lose a couple $100 if it meant bringing down a billionaire. not sure if I'd want to lose a few $1,000 to do it, but
Yeah, it's risky.
yeah. But that really surrounds like the idea of economics that we're getting at today, that it surrounds like economics is really a study of choice, and like Sam alluded to on our episode 2, is that there's no real fundamental or objective truth with economics. Rather, it's a choice, or that choices and shifting confidence amongst individuals and the global collectives decides where value lies. And they're able to create false value or real stability. That such choice and confidence guides markets like Adam Smith's invisible hand deciding economic futures, while also being able to create new economic realities like cryptocurrency or other new markets like cannabis is in Canada now, since we've legalized it. But really, at the heart of the whole question of economics lays this question of supply and demand in investigating choice in human economic transactions along land, labor, and capital resources. Adam Smith is known as the father of capitalism for his book, The Wealth of Nations, which popularized the idea of capitalism and liberal free markets over existing more traditional theories of mercantilism and economics. Capitalism itself suggests that capital resources can be used to be invested and reinvested to increase economic production and industrial output, and that kind of like put England ahead of other like European powers back during the Industrial Revolution, compared to say Spain, who is the real powerhouse of Europe before the Industrial Revolution occurred, because England was like reinvesting their capital into creating new innovations like the cotton gin and spinning jenny and stuff. It comes to that question of like, is there a zero-sum game in economics, like through trade and other things? Like, is there a winner and a loser? Or as David Ricardo suggested in 1817, is there a comparative advantage where you can kind of create a bigger pie in a liberal world of free market trade and stuff like that, where everybody benefits instead of there being a winner or a loser? And generally, like, the major views on economics is that there's mercantilists who would view it as a zero-sum game. There's liberalists who believe that there can be mutual benefit and create a larger pie for everybody. And then there's also Marxists, which would suggest that, like, because of class struggle and capitalist classes dominating over labor, that even if you're increasing the pie, like, not everybody's still benefiting at the end of the day. Sam, does this all sound like good objective foundation for economics, or is this all still kind of like made up mumbo jumbo? Is it like objectively bullshit, or is it like at least all relative in some sense?
I think like to start, I think it is mumbo jumbo. It's more of a philosophy of people interacting with their own economies. One part that Adam Smith and the book, it used to be called An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. So he wasn't really telling you how it worked. He was like posing a question.
He was a philosopher.
Yeah, right? Like I think that's hilarious, and then we just kind of made it law, and like this is how it works. It's a philosophy on how we have choice, how we interact with our economies, and how would you put a number to that? I think actually in my graduation, when I went to pick up my degree, I didn't go to the ceremony or anything. My parents asked me if, did you learn anything? And I replied, I still don't know how any of it works. I don't know. I don't know how money works. I don't know. Like, this seems kind of made up.
The more you learn, the more you realize there's more to learn.
Yeah, like it just kind of opens up the question, and you realize that it's based on theory, and we're not quite sure. So yeah, to be blunt, it is made up, just like anything else we do. As far as like monetary policy and money, it's all a social contract. So social contract needs as much as we rely on each other, you do need kind of a central guarantor and issuer, like the Fed or Central Canadian Bank. So this creates the central government, which should ideally exist anyway. but like when you talk about after this kind of classical into Keynesian and Friedman, we start kind of tinkering with our own domestic policies.
And with Keynesian economics, you're trying to have the focus on like job creation and employment and general wealth, social welfare, rather with monetary policy in the 70s was kind of like the objective shifted away from job creation towards just controlling like the general interest rate or the money, the supply of money.
Yeah, like in a way, I think so. Like from Adam Smith, you're talking about creating a concept of GDP. When we get into Keynesian, we really started realizing that you could tinker that level, that money supply, by issuing a interest rate. In the States, you'd find more of a kind of the Fed tinkering around that way. But you have more of a free market in terms of banks operating as they will. So they're like the
It's neoliberalism.
yeah, and it's in its way. And I mean, what we get to now is whether or not your domestic policy is created or however whatever forces are governing the domestic policy. We're having a tough time interacting internationally. So we're creating these policies, we're trying to live by the world law and our own laws, and we're trying to make ourselves better off, and we're struggling to actually understand how foreign governments operate, how they adjust their money policies, supplies, how they even calculate their demands. And that's kind of where we end up now. That's like something interesting, Cory, is the modern monetary theory. I don't know if you want to
touch on
take it
that
away
then.
on that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess if we're gonna talk about like the monetary theory in the 60s and 70s, progressing into Keynesianism, and then where do we find ourselves, right? Hip new popular theory in economics involves modern monetary theory, and I guess I'll start off with a little brief description. And that is that it describes currency as a public monopoly and unemployment as evidence that a currency monopolist, the central bank, is overly restricting the supply of the financial assets needed to pay for taxes.
Let it flow!
And satisfy savings desires. Yeah, exactly. So it harkens that for some reason whoever is supplying the currency is being overly restrictive, and
Fuck the feds,
right? And then it kind of harkens to it's probably restricted because of its relationship with how it relates to the private sector, and then kind of tries to set where its responsibilities are in a different kind of defined way. Before getting into how does it do it, why is this something to pay attention to? Contemporary economic models have always talked about the interest rate paradox, and that is that historically, back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we had interest rates that were in like the 15, 12, 10, 8% areas until we start to get up into the modern era in the 2000s, 2020s. We start to see countries like Japan experience phenomenon known as negative interest rates, where in order for them, based off of contemporary economic models, to balance their inflation and their employment and their other policy objectives, they need to offer negative interest rates in order to stimulate certain types of lending and borrowing, in order to apply a certain amount of stability to the financial system. And from the vantage point of modern monetary theorists, this demonstrates the inability maybe of modern theories or modern lenses to fully appreciate how far reality has debased from the theorized picture that we like to imagine in our models. To provide a little bit of a backstory on modern monetary theory without getting too deep into it, you guys might have heard about it after the 2008 financial collapse. It became really popular back then as we started to kind of deal with this like insurmountable debt crisis, because of the way that it positions the ability of central banks to kind of deal with those debts became a little bit more lucrative or attractive. It faded away a little bit until the last couple of years when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman out of New York,
Bronx.
kind of brought it
Yeah.
brought it up as brought it up in conversations in Congress, and so it's had a little bit more of a revival in terms of public debate since then. In terms of my thoughts on it, I don't know if modern monetary theory is good, quote unquote. Like, is any is any modern monetary theory good, quote unquote? I'm not sure, but in the sense that when I look at governments like the government of the the Central Communist Party in China, in terms of how they operate their financial mechanisms, in terms of like a where they maximize certain social gains over certain types of market forces. It seems that there is some sort of burgeoning new economics that's happening that we don't fully understand in the West, that we haven't fully put into account in our models, and maybe modern monetary theory isn't the be-all end-all of like what's the future of economics, but it may be a valuable source in terms of putting a little bit of a prism to the moment and understanding some of the circumstances that are going on. So
the things that I like about what I understand about modern monetary theory is how, like, theoretically we can just create the money that we need now to pay for things that we need in the future to help, so that, like, instead of waiting for the future we could have it tomorrow. But at the same time, I wonder, like, are we really enslaving ourselves to debt in that way? And, like, if we just, like, is debt unavoidable anyways? Like, is this a different form of debt at all?
And I think you're hitting it there on the is the debt unavoidable aspect.
Yeah.
Whereas I think what a modern monetary theorist might say about where we find ourselves right now is, like, we keep telling ourselves, like, so we're going to pay the debt off. We keep increasing the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
We keep accruing more debt, right? But what bookends this whole continuity of the process is that, like, the debt's going to get repaid, or that, like, it's at least in line to get repaid, or at least servicing its repayment in some way.
Except we need more money
right.
for other
but
things.
But at the back end of, I think, a lot of people's mental space, they kind of understand that, like, this is kind of like a financial abstraction that exists in order for things to operate a certain way. But, like, to imagine that all of the debt that exists in all of the world will get repaid is to not fully understand how economics operates. So modern monetary theory almost takes that, like, realization or realism of debt into this, like, space that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, and respectably so, but and that's where for me it's like it's only convincing insofar as it's describing it. I don't know if the prescription's fair, but the description seems to at least hammer home on some certain points.
Yeah, I think that's the main key point. It's and it's weird that it's brought up now, like, that central government can be like, we understand under this model that your debt is just like this number. It could be anything. Nobody really cares. You're not held accountable is really the answer in domestic currencies. And that kind of, like, brings us way back to why we go to war, and why there's, like, mercantilism and all of that. But for modern monetary theory to point out that inevitably it doesn't matter, we still use it for, like you said, historical measures. We use it to keep track. We use it to kind of fulfill this old policy that we had, and this is how we do things, and we have to keep ourselves in check. But it just keeps growing, and we don't like it. It doesn't matter. So what do you? I think the danger there is revealing to the general public that it doesn't matter.
It's unavoidable in a sense.
Yeah, not holding other governments accountable. Like, basically you just use it as some leverage point, saying, like, no, we're just going to take a little bit out now, like, we're not going to call in the entire debt, but we have to do some domestic cleanup, and we want some of your abilities right now.
Yeah.
So it's a way of keeping governments in check, but to admit that ultimately you have to declare war to have it all, that's where we get into a little bit of a risky situation. And I mean, we're already there.
It's the question of, like,
What?
in just regular monetary policy since the 80s, we've gotten to this point where like these debt ceilings in the States, every time they pass a bill, like they have to increase their debt ceiling just to make sure that the whole thing stays afloat. And that's monetary policy itself. So with modern monetary policy, it's a question like, can we just say that this debt can go on forever, that our economy's not going to shut down just because we're printing off more money? And like it just kind of asks that question that like, do we need to worry about the debt itself? Like, are we really enslaved to it, or are we investing in the future? Depending on like how corrupt your politicians are, it could change the question.
I think that goes back to one of the points Cory brought up was that it wouldn't compete with the private sector. So when you're passing these policies, specifically in the U.S. and Canada, it's like if we're in trouble, the whole country's in trouble. We're like,
who do we owe this
It's
money
over.
to?
We'll just hit the reset button. In the States, if you can't pass your policy or your budget, and the government isn't, like, you're in a shutdown, then that's you not being able to compete with the private sector, or like that's you deliberately not engaging with the private sector, and that's where they are. So that not only are they not accountable internationally, but they're not accountable domestically.
Yeah.
So who's running the show?
The private sector, it seems like.
Yeah, and that's the American dream. But if the private sector isn't held accountable either, now who's in charge?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
and you're talking about bailouts and stuff like that. Who's is the left hand washing the right, or the other, or vice versa?
Well, and I think not to fucking beat a dead horse with modern monetary theory at all, but I think they point to the financial collapse and kind of like the lack of consequences of all the, and the kind of financial after effects, and they're like, well, I mean, maybe maybe we face criticisms of these ideas as being like fantasy or something, but like the reality that you're describing and defending is like a nightmare or like hell. Like it's like it almost like it's like, well, if you're telling me like 2008 2009 and the consequences thereof are like how it ought to be, like what's the opposite of that? How do I sign up to support that? Because like like it was like we're just talking about, like, again, a massive shift in terms of private risk to public, and
it's a social contract, and if no matter what, we know that the contract is void. Like now we're descending into we're not descending, I guess. It's just we're switching into anarchy, yeah. And if you realize that, that's a very different world than where we live now. Fair trade and all that.
I mean, overall too, with the like, I like the idea of Keynesian economics generally compared to monetary policy that we've been in since the 80s. But it's that question of like, do you take the Keynesian economics strategy would almost be like to increase taxes so that you're going to eventually pay off the investments that you're making now for the future, or do you just increase the money supply in modern monetary theory so that in that sense, like, you have a lot of money right now, you invest in the future, ideally everything pays itself off eventually, you might still have debt and you might never pay off that debt, and I think it's that question of like, is that what China's doing now at the same time? Like, because when you mentioned China before, Sam, I kind of wanted to ask if you could describe how China manipulates their currency in different ways at all, like.
Generally, so if they're pegged to the U.S. dollar, it's a system built on trust.
Yeah, the whole world is pegged to the U.S. dollar.
And if you go to the World Bank, basically you post your money supply, your population, your basket of goods, cost of living, and it creates an index that you then peg to the world. If you just don't, let's say, let's put up a city in 3 days, whole country's employed, money's
Lots
flowing,
of labor.
a lot of GDP, 10%, we pumped it out.
Ghost towns all around.
That comes from a money supply. Now, how that money is spent, so you still need a actual demand for money, and how it's spent, you're just tweaking the numbers. You're reporting it yourself, and
You're creating work without a output.
and
or
it is important to know, like, the only way that actually works is through international trade. It doesn't matter if you flux your own or mess with your own domestic currency. That's just your own world, and all of a sudden milk costs more. When you're trading to a pegged currency like US dollar, it doesn't matter that milk costs more here. They're allowed to trade and pump out goods to the US, earn some US dollars after manipulating their currency. The US dollar is now worth more of their dollars. US dollar, and the US ends up holding those dollars. So that's how trade works. Like, they own foreign currencies. You can't just we'd
I
like
feel
our
like
money
it-
back.
It
So
works
it's
for
flux.
them.
Yeah, but like, it's like a form of arbitrage. Like, so if you are manipulating your money and current contracts, like, it's not like the government's approving every trade deal that goes on. Like, if you want anything from China, you buy it. You sign off on, like, within a bandwidth of US dollar, plus minus 60 cents or whatever. That's a lot, but and
Canadian
then
dollar to American dollar.
and then if you domestically alter your currency, you're still held to account. You're like, so you create a position of arbitrage. What you say to the world, which is the issue with modern monetary theory, it's not even the issue. Like MMT, let's just say it,
Modern monetary
is just
theory.
pointing it out.
Yeah.
They just added that last point, like, and we all know it doesn't make sense.
It's descriptive of what's happening, not prescription.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like
What
Cory
we
said.
should do, but-
So when you're manipulating your own currency, specifically if you don't have a voice, if you don't have a mass media shooting it out to the world saying, like, yeah, we got some pretty bad sweatshops or whatever,
Yeah.
do it. Report
Because
it.
there's a lot going on behind the scenes in China in that way.
And I don't even know. Like, they're very real. Like, the indexes are based on real numbers. You've pumped
Yeah.
out this much. This many people had jobs.
They
This
have
many
the output.
people were paid. That we increased production here. So 10% GDP is, in the West, we find that unsustainable. Or
Yeah.
we see a crash coming. But over there, if you have enough land, labor, capital, and you're allocating those funds efficiently, 10% might be okay. So that's where people accuse China of manipulating their currency. Proving it, you'd have to be their government. You'd have to be in their treasury. I don't even know what their
Yeah.
what their
Whatever
system
central
works.
Politburo kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to know how exactly it works, and it is important to note that they are only accused. It's there's allegations.
Yeah.
They're not, like, you can point to certain facts that you think are there, but nobody's really said, "We got you, China."
Bit of a game of cat and mouse.
Yeah, like, and it's domestic policy working internationally. Like, it's, again, we're stuck against this wall where that's up to them, but we continue to trade with them, so they and haven't faced any consequences. If they go to protectionism and decide not to trade with anyone, then that's their call. When interacting in a global or Western dominated system,
We're all playing a game with no established rules, and then East meets West. And
exactly. So I mean,
it's anarchy, really.
and that's
Nobody
the thing.
knows.
There are no established rules for a central government or a central global bank. Even though we have a World Bank,
that gets
there
back
isn't-
to how
there's only 119 members or something like that, or
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I can't remember the last time I looked at that, but what do you like?
It gets back to that
That's
question
it.
of, like, economics as a theory of choice, and whether it's like individuals or like collectives regionally and globally, that we can all make small changes, but like, you know, China does what they do, America does what they do. There's some balance in the middle, and the environment might suffer the consequences.
Inevitably. Just
Yeah.
take one more for the team.
Okay. Remy, thank you for joining us today at O Media, coming back for more and now being a contributing member to our quantum creative community. As a contributor to O Media, we're happy to give you the title of Executive Director, which you can now add to your resume.
Congratulations.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm excited to use that.
Welcome aboard officially.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be part of it.
Yeah, we're stoked to have you join us and thrilled by your initiative to run your own segment with your sisters. We really look forward to having you back on the show in the future. So before we start the interview, is there anything you want to say to your friends and family listening back at home?
Started from the bottom, now I'm here. Executive directing, building that CV. Look at me now.
Hell yeah. So, just to start, we'll go with, what's your favorite animal or animals?
Well, I have 2 cats, so I really love my little kitties, but my favorite animal are elephants because they're amazing. And one day I saw at Six Flags, at the zoo at Six Flags, I saw an elephant eat his grass in the water, and all the other elephants were really jealous, and then the elephant peed in the water. So I thought that was a really ballsy move.
They
So
are
yeah,
smart creatures, yeah.
I had some respect for that.
Yeah, I recently saw a video of like an elephant, like there's a crowd looking at the elephant in the zoo, and the elephant just like smacks this one tourist's phone out of their hand.
Because
But
that's
then
their prerogative.
It went reaching to try to grab the phone off the ground after.
Yeah.
and-
They were probably like, they have to go right now. They're watching my majestic beauty.
They're filming me now.
Elephants.
I want to see what you got on that. Okay, well, next question. Do you have any go-to songs for brainstorming and productivity, or just generally favorite songs?
Well, I'm really into Erykah Badu. It keeps it like nice and smooth, good for studying. But if I really need to like get in the zone for something, like J. Cole.
Yeah, J. Cole all the way.
All the way. He'll get me wherever I need to go.
And is there any favorite dreams or memories you have you'd like to share with us?
I guess one of my favorite dreams I had was actually a few years ago, where it was the elephant. I went back in time on a pink elephant and was back in my 6th grade class on some crazy field trip in the jungle, and I got to say something back to this girl who was not very nice to me in elementary, and my dream like let me put my 2 cents in and like
Yeah.
maybe a little bit tell her off, and I woke up feeling pretty good.
Got to address a little bit of that childhood trauma.
Yeah, I
in the
woke
dream
up
space.
and I was like, I feel like I healed.
Maybe in her dream that night, she woke up being like, oh, I was kind of mean to Remy in high school.
Yeah, you know.
All right, so is there any favorite black people that you have from history?
Well, definitely Malcolm X, but I think my favorite is Fela Kuti, who is a Nigerian artist. He's a freedom fighter. He's known as the Nigerian Bob Marley.
Do you have any quarantine confessions or crazy things you've witnessed during the pandemic?
Oh, well, I guess there's one funny story, I guess, that happened during the first round of quarantines. I happened to be going to the sex shop because I wanted some sexy stuff.
The sex shop, not just
I mean,
a sex
there's
shop.
not a sex, it's the sex shop. Every sex
We know
shop.
the one.
Yeah. So I went to the sex shop, and at the time it was only, I mean, I'm sure probably now it's still only curbside delivery.
I've been inside of it more recently anyway.
I bet you know. Yeah.
With Cory.
Hey, we were just passing by, you know.
Yeah, something like going as a team.
There was 3 of us. It was a team effort.
All right. So, well, I went to the door. They didn't allow me in, and I told the lady what I was looking for, and she helped me, brought a whole bunch of things to the window, just a bunch of like dildos and stuff to the window to let me peruse. And so eventually I got what I wanted, but she got a phone call within that time when I was paying, and all I really heard on the other line was, "Yeah, sorry, I can't hear you, sir. is that a penis pump? You need a penis pump? And I just couldn't help but laugh.
It's hard not to laugh sometimes when you're in the sex shop and you feel guilty about it.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, I wonder if the guy on the other line knows there's anyone else there, and she's just yelling penis pump. And then even after that, she was like, oh no, it's not a penis pump? You want a pocket pussy? Okay, we have some of those. And so I guess that was just, but even at the time, it was just a really good time for people to be yelling weird stuff. I think a few times I heard some.
A fun social moment juxtaposed by the COVID
Yeah,
lockdown.
no one is really saying anything. Everyone's in their house just looking for their penis pumps. And their pocket pussies. Yeah.
Really at home, trying to worry about the things that matter,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be sitting at home without my dildo pocket pussy. Penis pump.
I mean, I gotta confess too, the last time I was in the sex shop, I noticed on the wall, like, the pocket pussies, but that they actually, like, customizable from different porn stars.
Oh.
And I was kind of intrigued, not enough
that's
to
fun.
spend money on it, but
But, like, maybe enough
kind
to,
of
like,
curious,
go back.
And you'd actually have to get two to really notice the difference.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to compare. Yeah.
Yeah. So, just moving along, it's, where do you want to be in 5 years from now?
In 5 years from now, I hope to be on an island, laying by the beach, having casual income from my small teaching job where I have made some sort of preschool education sort of thing, just casually,
Yeah.
just kind of makes me money so I could be a beach bum. That's
One
kind
of your side hustles, probably.
Yeah, I just hope to, whatever I'm doing, it allows me to sit on the beach for a long period of time.
Yeah. And what's on your Black Lives Matter wish list for systemic change?
Oh, I mean, I guess it's pretty long, but it mostly boils down to education. I hope that, things are being taught more in school and outside of school, and, I think that if there's no push to decolonize stories and to talk about things that are going on, then there's no real hope for anything to actually have real tangible change. We need to be talking about it, and there's to be a decolonization of our stories.
Right on. Yeah, more education all around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, in the schools and the police trainings and
Yep. Yeah.
a long list really. And I'll say our last question for today is there any advice you would want to give a stranger? Or the best advice you can give a stranger?
The best advice I can give a stranger is be good or be good at it.
If you're gonna be bad, you gotta be good at it.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. We've been thrilled having you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been fun being in the studio.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
All right. Well, we look forward to having you on future segments and episodes and everything else, seeing what you do.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited to contribute more and get the word out there and talk about fun stuff with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I guess that about wraps us up for the interview and the podcast as a whole. So thanks for tuning in for this episode, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Next time.
Woo!
Kukuru, kukuru, eka wa. Kukuru, 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 Bunch and worry cake, face to face, march with it, I late, no mistake, made up a lie, march with chain, I show proper while I fake, see you this off, I see your face, come up for that, come up my way, come to my office, I'm right in your bed, use your mother, 1 mouse sense, when in my head there, but like a pest, barry there, cocoon to tense, I don't want you, 100%, who ya payment, carry your sense, no bad energy, who ya forget, the faithful demons never progress, who ya confess, I abolish.
Waiting I do,
Papa Soldier,
waiting I do,
government,
waiting I do,
landlord,
waiting I do,
town council,
waiting I do,
Papa Soldier,
waiting I do,
government,
waiting I do,
landlord,
waiting I do.
every day we said the watch of the buckle and the deposit of a magazine and our lady, the first and the beat up, but the figure let it out. The beat we did the suffer, we did the hard, we did the hunger, we did the properly, the but the suffer we are, and we'll see you soon.
Waiting I do.
I abolish.
Eka wa.